stop. Before you pick a side in Israel versus Iran, before you argue about politics, before you tell me America should stay out of it, there's something almost nobody is talking about. And by the end of this video, I'm going to connect missiles in the Middle East to the insurance premium sitting in your mailbox. Most Americans are looking at the wrong map. They see a religious war, a border dispute, a humanitarian crisis. They see Israel versus Iran. That's the headline. But headlines and stories are not always the same thing. And if you stay with me until the end, I'm going to show you why this conflict matters, even if you don't know where Tehran is on a map. Because Israel is the headline. American dominance is the story. Here's the uncomfortable reality. American prosperity at home has always depended on American power abroad. Not because America is nicer, not because America is meaner, because that's how empires work. The dollar, oil, shipping lanes, global trade, supply chains, energy markets, borrowing costs, they're all connected. Most people never think about that because the system has worked for their entire lives. But systems only become visible when they start breaking. And right now, cracks are starting to appear. Now here's where most people get confused. Israel and America are fighting two different wars. Israel's war is survival. For Israelis, October 7th wasn't a news story. It was a warning. Hezbollah, Hamas, Iranian missiles, drone attacks, proxy forces, those threats are real. Those threats are immediate. America's objective is different. America is playing a much longer game, a game measured in decades, not news cycles. And this is where things get interesting. Washington isn't just looking at Israel. Washington is looking at the petrodollar, China's access to Middle Eastern energy, BRICS nations challenging dollar dominance, the Strait of Hormuz, global energy flows, reserve currency status, the economic architecture that has made America the most powerful country on earth. This isn't charity. This isn't friendship. This is geopolitics, cold, calculated, unapologetic geopolitics. And here's the question almost nobody asks. What happens if America stops winning? Seriously, what happens? Because power doesn't disappear. It transfers. If America retreats, China advances, Russia advances, Iran advances. Alternative financial systems grow, energy routes shift, the dollar weakens, and suddenly Americans discover that foreign policy was actually domestic policy with a longer supply chain. Gas prices, inflation, mortgage rates, retirement accounts, consumer goods, everyday life, all connected. But now let's connect this to something even more personal, insurance, because this is the part nobody sees coming. Insurance doesn't actually sell money. Insurance sells a promise, and rebuilding depends on lumber, steel, copper, concrete, labor, transportation, energy, semiconductors. Every one of those things depends on global stability. Now stay with me, because this is where the entire insurance crisis starts making sense. If the dollar weakens, construction materials become more expensive. If energy costs surge, transportation becomes more expensive. If supply chains fracture, everything becomes more expensive. And when everything becomes more expensive, insurance becomes more expensive. Premiums rise, deductibles rise, coverage shrinks, reinsurance costs explode, carriers pull out of markets, and homeowners start asking the same question we've been discussing for years. Why is insurance becoming unaffordable? Because insurance is nothing more than a giant reconstruction pricing model. That's it. The entire industry is built on one question. How much will it cost to rebuild tomorrow? Now imagine tomorrow becomes dramatically more expensive. What happens? That's the real risk. Not just missiles, not just headlines, not just politics, economic instability. And that instability eventually shows up in every insurance policy in America, which leads to the most important point in this entire discussion. Every missile launched through the Strait of Hormuz, Every disruption to global energy markets, every challenge to dollar dominance, every shift in global power eventually finds its way into an insurance premium somewhere in America, including Florida, including California, including your neighborhood. That's why homeowners should care, not because of politics, because reconstruction costs determine insurance costs, and insurance costs determine whether families can afford to stay in their homes. Israel may be the headline, American dominance may be the story, but your insurance premium may ultimately be the ending. If that connection surprised you, subscribe to the NAPAICC Insider, because the next thing we're going to discuss is even bigger. What happens to the American insurance market if the dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency? Trust me, you don't want to miss that conversation.